This is a read of The River Between Us by Richard Peck, Chapter 7. Delphine always made time for her trips down to Front Street to take the air, as she said. She'd come to terms with Roger's store since that's all we had to offer, and gave it a little light browsing most afternoons. Like Calinda, she became a landmark. Grant Tower had never seen anything like either of these beings, though as it turned out, Delphine stirred them more. Once she reached flat ground, she moved with wondrous grace under a parasol hanging in points of lacework. The word went round that she never wore the same bonnet twice. This brought every woman in town to the window to see her passing by. She had, in fact, 5 or 6 bonnets, including the new straw ones, but she retrimmed them throughout the evenings. From the bottomless supply of artificial flowers and fruit, grain rosettes, glittering buckles, and feathers, Calinda brought from the timber. Front Street was a loblolly down by the landing, and so Delphine had to gather her skirts to keep them clear of the mud. This brought every loafer in Jackson County to the porch of T.W. Jenkins's store, hoping for a glimpse of her ankles. Until the last showboat played Grand Tower that summer, Delphine was the greatest draw in this part of the state. And this Sekish gal strolled a town that was snapping with the stars and stripes of Union flags. She hadn't been gone long when I noticed a knot of women down the distance one afternoon. They were starting up our hill. Cass and Calinda had taken a dip net down the river, so I was the only one who saw. I was beating the braided rugs over the porch railing. I'd heard somewheres of ladies with no more to do than call on one another in the afternoons. That didn't sound like much. That didn't sound much like Grand Tower, and the climb alone would have discouraged them from us. Still, here a bunch came, looking for more pathway than they could find. Darting inside, I told Mamma. I didn't see surprise in her face, but she grabbed her head to smooth her hair and sent me for her shoes. She'd cast off her apron for a fresh one by the time I got back. She was still cramming her bare feet into the shoes when we heard them on the porch. One of them was Mrs. T.W. Jenkins, another was Mrs. Manfred Caddy, and Mrs. R.M. Breeze, the preacher's wife. They looked like 3 of Cass's hens, all feathered out, but suffering in this heat. They were sucking air to catch their breath. Mamma pretended surprised to see them, as if she spent a summer day in her shoes and fresh apron. Mrs. Pruitt, Mrs. Manfred Caddy said, "It is hot weather and a hard climb, and we are all busy women preparing for war." She fetched up a shuddering breath, and Mamma said calmly, "I am up for the day myself." "We won't take any more than a moment of your time," Mrs. Jenkins said, and they came in, looking around as if they never set foot here before. Mamma could have shown them into the front room for a breath of air from the river. She gestured them into chairs around the table. The kitchen hung in the foreign scent of Calinda's pan pate, a New Orleans gingerbread, baking in the Dutch oven. The whole kitchen was an oven, Mrs. Breeze sighed. "Mrs. Pruitt, we all understand that life has not been an easy row for you to hoe," said Mrs. Caddy. Mamma's hands were folded before her. "I haven't asked for charity in this town." Her gaze brushed Mrs. Breeze. "What good would it do me?" "Nobody mentioned charity," Mrs. Caddy went on, "and it's nobody's business but your own who you let out your rooms to, or who you take under your roof." Mamma clearly saw eye to eye with her on that. "But the tide is turned, Mrs. Pruitt," said Mrs. Caddy. Now our watchword must be, united we stand, divided we fall. I will put it plain, we are at war, in case you haven't heard, and you've got enemy aliens in your house. We come in good faith to let you know you're on thin ice, and you're giving them succor, Mrs. Breeze chimed. Mamma's hands clenched in her apron, but she spoke mildly. Well, I don't see how I can send them home. The boats isn't running. She glanced at the preacher's wife. We weren't churchgoers, but one thing we'd never had clothes. Mrs. Breeze had been agog since she got here to see how heathens lived. Shall I send them down to the preacher for shelter? Mamma inquired. Mrs. Breeze bristled. I wouldn't have them at the parsonage overnight, she said, about to spit. I wouldn't have given them loft space in the barn, no straw from the stable. We're true blue Americans here, and the whole community knows what they are. Mama's eyes narrowed. What are they? Why, spies, of course, Miss Catty rang out. One of them's eternally out in the timber, surveying the territory for an invasion, they say. And the white one's all over town getting the lay of the land. She's down there right now. Spies? Mama pondered. Then they come to the wrong town, didn't they? If we had a secret, you three would tell it. The bonnets quivered and drew close. They hadn't made that climb to be insulted. And another thing, Mrs. T.W. Jenkins piped up. It's enough to gag a maggot to see that overdressed little miss, that Delphine, whoever, putting herself on public display. She's switching her curtails up and down Front Street, even as we speak. And the men in this town is staring holes in her, the brazen little hussy. Mama stroked her cheek. She's a big city girl, Mama said at last. She don't know how restless small town men can get. They say the porch on your husband's store is about to collapse under the weight of the men watching Delphine go by, and I can see how it might be a worry to you. Mrs. Jenkins jumped on that. If you're insinuating that my husband has any interest in that painted up little floozy, I have only this to answer you, Mrs. Pruitt. I've held on to my husband unlike someone I could name. The kitchen went dead. You could hear the buzz of a horsefly circling. Then Mama said, get out of my house. They had never been ordered out of anywhere. They bumbled and bumped into one another. Mrs. Catty gave Mrs. Jenkins a look like maybe she'd gone too far. They were at the door when the preacher's wife turned back. Mrs. Pruitt, she said, speaking low, as one mother to another, I will have to say my piece. It don't look good having a son the age of your boy under the same roof with young women we don't know nothing about, spies or otherwise. It just don't look right. I was next to Mama, standing with her. I don't reckon my son will be under my roof much longer, Mama said. You have a son, don't you? Will he be going to war? My son, Bertram? Mrs. Breeze stared. My land, no, he won't be going to war. He's 40. Third, why no, he won't be going. Then they were gone. Mama leaned against the door jamb where we lingered for the air. She smoothed her apron and thought about taking off to spare it. Then at length she spoke softly. I work hard not to draw their fire and to keep us decent and together. I live and let live. I don't even go down to town if I can send one of you. But it doesn't signify. But it don't signify. They can't let you be. One day they come after you. That was a long speech from Mama. Now in the quiet, I was thinking about Pa and wondered if she was too. We rarely spoke of him and didn't now. What'll happen next, Mama? She stroked her chin. Well, they wouldn't dare to run Delphine out of town. It wouldn't look good to their menfolk. I have an idea. They've got it out of their systems. Mama, do you wish Delphine and Kalinda had never come? Would it have just been easier on us to be like we was? She looked over at me in surprise. I was as tall as she was now. No, I'm not sorry they come. You can't believe but every other word Delphine says, and if vanity is a sin, she'll fry. But before she got here, I wouldn't have answered back those battle axes. That Delphine don't lack confidence in herself. I'll give her that. I believe a little has worn off on me. She put some starch in my spine. I hadn't thought of such a thing. I didn't know grown people changed or were changed. I thought being grown was safer than that. Delphine's wearing off on you too, Mama told me, just like Kalinda's wearing off on Cass. Delphine on me? It's in your walk a little, and you're tidier about your hair, and you don't look so much like you was dragged backwards through a brush fence. Many thanks, Mama, I said, but not the corsets, never them. Well, no, Mama said, there's limits. Then, not 2 minutes after our recent callers had vanished from view, there came Delphine tolling up towards us. Climbing the backbone was the biggest job of her day. Her sundress was made of ticking, a fine black line against white. She had it in handfuls, climbing over rill and ridge. She labored along like she could feel every stone through her thin slipper soles. The silken morning glories in her bonnet looked to be working loose. Her face was beet red and streaming in this heat. Her curls hung lank. She was using the parasol for a walking stick. It was a far cry from the strolling the pavements of New Orleans, but she kept true to her ways. I glanced at Mamma. She was stifling a smile at the sight of all this elegance melting away, and it took something to coax a smile out of Mamma. Delphine fetched up at the bottom of the porch steps, breathing so heavy you'd think she'd been pulling stumps. Nom de Dieu, she gasped, and a few other French words. Planting the parasol in the ground, she plunged a gloved hand onto her reticule. Yes, gloves in this weather, little string ones, with her bare fingers sticking out. She pulled up a handbill and shook it at us. A showboat. It comes down from somewhere called Muscatine, Iowa. But of course, the musicians are from New Orleans. Where else? Ethiopian medlars and a drama and E.P. Christie minstrels. And the public is invited to dance upon the stage at the conclusion of the program, she quoted. A showboat, and the last before they're taken off the river. Delphine was almost beside herself. Mama and I saw how dull her life had been all this time. She was making it so lively for us. So of course when the showboat played Grand Tower, we'd go too. We'd go, Mama too. Our visitors that afternoon had something to do with it. Then Noah dispelled all doubt in the matter. He came home from his work that night, lips white with anger. Being Noah, he'd have said nothing, though I heard him kick at the porch stairs before I saw him. My spine was starchier than before, too, so I trailed him into his room, and there I demanded to know what particular burr he got under his saddle. He didn't want to tell, and then he did. They run their mouths down there around the forge, he said, disgusted with humanity. They talk to hear their heads rattle. I'd like to shorten the ears off about 6 of them, maybe more. For what? They say we're sending signals to the south from the light out of our windows. Who? Us, he snapped. They say we're signaling the Confederate Navy out of this house. It's what the lamps is for. He was wrought up for certain. This is talk against Delphine, I said. They mean Delphine is spying? Of course, that's just what they meant, like there was any sense to it. Men gossip worse than women and don't even know it. Noah was hopping mad, as if trying to court a girl under his own roof didn't give him fits enough. For one thing, he wouldn't own up to how sweet he was on Delphine. For another, there was always witnesses to every little thing. The wonder is Noah didn't flee this house of women sooner than he did. I let him rant and use some language I won't repeat here. It wasn't like him, but we'd be going to the showboat show, no question about it. We'd pull the money out of the well for the tickets, and we'd all sit in the front row like everybody else, maybe more so.